Questions?
Sorry. I wanted to offer an interpretation of both papers and then particularly kind of get Bill's response in a second. So the first is to yours, Kat. I mean, in a sense, I am looking at this as a type of a fire-hardened exercise in abductive. It's an abductive machine. It just generates abduction by which I can then hypothesize whether it's true or not. And the social sciences could sure do with a lot more creativity in the abductive phase of research. So I can see this as being valid. And then on the other hand, I see exactly the same thing going on with Bill's work in terms of proliferating the number of precedents which designers consider when working in a domain. Because if design is always redesign in the way that Jungnickel, the Czech Norwegian theorist, suggests, that designers are always sort of not so much creative individuals as cobblers or as collage. I'm trying to think of that famous paper in Design Issues, design as a type of bricolage. Then they need a lot more better sources of that. But then I saw this other thing, so this is the kind of the question bit. I suddenly thought, thinking back to Pelle's talk this morning about lead users, lead innovators, and capital loves it when it finds lead innovators. And it's slightly problematic that because corporations are actually so boring and stupid at actually coming up with new things, they love it when they finally find people coming up with new things in the community because it becomes fodder for increasing the innovation of capital, which the capitalist organisations like a corporation can't do. So they need lead users. But unfortunately, they're few and far between lead users. And then I suddenly thought, isn't it interesting that what Bill and the unit is doing when you give a very playful device that's been generated through a series of kind of abductive methods, when you give that device to a bunch of users, sort of in the way Woolgar used to talk about enrolling users through user trials, I suddenly thought, you're training people to be lead users. When you deposit an object like this in somebody's house, somebody who is not a lead user and innovating with the technology, becomes or gets enrolled in the practice of becoming a lead user and innovator. And so, the reductive and ridiculous version of this question is, this looks like a really clever sort of imperial policy for enrolling subjects into the process of innovation.
Next time we approach an industry for funding, I'll use it. That's not typically how we think about our work. I think the problem with that interpretation is that if they're lead users, they're lead users of a really, in our case, of kind of one-off designs that are very idiosyncratic and purpose-built. So it's not clear how it would kind of be of commercial value. I think what you said earlier about populating the world with examples of design that other designers can look at when they're thinking about what they do next is much closer to what we're about. So often when we build the designs we make are really, they're not, I don't think of the stuff we do as speculative design, quite certainly not critical design. It's more just design explorations with trying to find ways to think quite differently about both technology and in a way, people and the way that relate to technology, and then put those out as examples for all kinds of people to use in thinking about their own issues. And in particular, we don't make things to commercialize, but we do make things that we would like to see people in commercial context learn from and be inspired by. And in fact, they're both at kind of medium, but actually fairly deep, somewhat deeper, almost political positions that we're taking through our technology that we'd like to see go out there into the world a bit more.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Kat, I was very interested in your comments on the installation and the various ways in which you were encountering your data in non-traditional ways for a sociologist. I think that of all the things that I've gotten from working closely with designers, new ways of encountering my data are certainly some of the most important for me. And once it started happening, just even discovering the value of a cube of Post-its and putting bits of data on them that you can now put on walls and move around. And I really had sort of realized just how much my hands had felt tied trying to do all of that in my head for so many years. And that finally putting it out there, which is probably a practice that emerged because of the essentially collaborative nature of work for designers, but even working on my own, right? Now being able to take some of those tools that would put it out there for multiple people to be able to access and manipulate. It was such a freeing thing for me. I can't help but think that there are many other sociologists in the closet who need to start encountering their data in more physical ways. I think we could for the discipline.
Yeah, I completely agree, because there's such a range of ways in which we can play with the data, and I think sociologists do that anyway. I just don't think it's necessarily been something that's been valued and shared and made public. Because I always learn, whenever I'm working collaboratively with someone, I always learn so much from seeing them work, from seeing their practices revealed, the actual way which they write, or they organize their data, or they analyze in all sorts of different ways. But I think that whole thing about just moving it out of your head and onto things that aren't necessarily the computer screen, I find particularly attractive. And so whether it's a Post-it note, or it's hanging from fishing wire from the ceiling, or you've been welding it together, I think there's some really nice ways of just translating knowledge into other forms that make me think about things differently, which is why I think of myself as a sociologist that makes stuff. In the process of thinking, I tend to just not so much even translate, but just think about my data in different forms and ways, and then move it back into different mediums. So, absolutely.
It was a little bit of a tension for me when I had created these mappings using these Post-its that were very important for this book I was doing on privacy, and I had wanted to put photographs of the mapping in the book, in each of these mappings, and of course, the publisher was not interested in these photographs and didn't see any value to having the spatial relations of the information and everything. So it got translated into lists in an appendix, which is so not the exciting part of it. But again, we're back to sort of these differences in what the disciplines value as work product and as deliverables that are contaminants as opposed to value themes that a sociologist could offer.
Absolutely. I think there's a much bigger talk and discussion about the tensions and how we can make those productive contaminants, or think about ways in which they can be interventions in sociology, or even just making visible some of the practices that already exist that maybe just don't have the attention they should have.
As many of you know, Bill has been doing the cultural probes and became famous at that, and didn't. Everything that you do like that, and then afterwards you hate that you invented it because it's being used in so many ways. What I was struck with in your talk was not the lead user. I mean, I think that criticism could be valid. It's an okay take on it, but I was more interested in to see, by working the way that you're doing, you produce a repertoire of examples. We're back to old Shen Dewey and all the stuff there. And I think that's the real, so even if one is working with social innovation, that can be part of the repertoire. So I would not go the way to say that this is user-driven innovation or anything, but I would think that many of your examples are really valid contributions to someone who tries to build up a repertoire of how to deal with Harvard's Women Association or whatever it would be. So I would see it that way. I think it's important to understand that that's at least in design the way that I think our main way of theorizing to build up that repertoire. And then it's really interesting with Kat, and I really loved your presentation. I mean, you're already doing sociology in a designerly way. So this was kind of an early proof of how that is possible, and the comment there is that many of the methods are similar, or the ways of going about, as with Bill, and I think that it would be really inspiring also for people in the design world to hear sociologists work act like that. So it's not really a question, only congratulations to the contribution.
Do you want to say thank you?
Sorry, do you want to? Oh, just to say, thank you very much. That's but it's interesting that you said that I'm kind of a sociologist working in a designerly way, which is interesting interpretation of my work, because in a way I don't use the word design at all, except in relation to response to Bill's work. I think I use the word make more, and that's just
the
my
designers
personal
take loose making into
yes,
design.
absolutely, and I'm not kind of arguing against you. I'm just thinking about my distinction in that is that I've never been trained as a designer, and I don't. I've just become a sociologist, and I'm still trying to get my head around that. I'm still like becoming anything else at the moment. But I was very fortunate to work with Nina for quite a while, to have these kind of interests that I had in exploring materiality and experimenting with things, not crushed, I think. Because she could have very easily said to me, well, that's very nice, but you're not doing design. You're doing sociology. And yet she didn't. I still fulfilled all of the sociological requirements, but I was still, in a way, nurtured to explore alternative ways of thinking through materials. So I think I think about, and maybe this is unnecessary to even talk to you, because I think I'm agreeing with what you're saying, but the whole notion of making for me is this process that is constant. It's kind of a constant suspension of being made. It's never, in a way, has a finished point. I may produce a paper at the end because that's the requirement of my sociological training and outputs at the moment, but the process in the middle of just still thinking through and making things is very important to the way in which I produce knowledge.
Yeah, to provoke your question, why is ambiguity good?
Yeah, well, first of all, ambiguity is a kind of slightly, sorry, must wake up. Ambiguity is really a pointer to a number of different things, but we often design the stuff we make to be quite open-ended. And so a lot of the things we make are really, it's clear what they do, but it's not clear why they do it or why anybody should be interested. They don't convey a kind of narrative of use in the sense of this is what it's for and this is what kind of person you should be if you engage with our designs. And in that sense, they're a bit ambiguous as to what they're supposed to be about. And the reason why that's very interesting to us is, in a way, it's twofold. One is because I kind of resist the notion that design in general, and particularly commercial design, should be in the business of telling us how to lead our lives. And that's part of the kind of thing I would like to be able to introduce into design of technologies more generally, is this notion that you can design resources for people to appropriate themselves to do what they want to do, rather than sort of things that script their engagement with the world, whatever that might mean. But the other reason why I think that's very interesting for us is because it means that when we give people stuff to try, we don't know what they're going to do with it. We don't have a notion of what the right way to live with the things we make is. We have a notion that we might be building interesting situations. And then we can learn a lot about the people and about the things they value and the ways they interact with technology and each other and the world and everything through the ways they engage with the things we design. So sort of running throughout our research, I think, which is also true for some of the ways we learn about people in the first place, is this kind of I feel like a bored kid or something. I always want surprise. I always want to be having the world tell me new things, and that's one of the reasons why designing in that way is effective.
Any questions? Could I ask one then? And it's to do with the issue of doing social science research where there is an excision of, one imagines the research as a research encounter or event, and that event gets articulated in particular sorts of ways, and certain things are constantly being eluded or excluded or marginalised or bracketed from that. And in part, sort of John Moore's sort of reaction to that is how does one bring all that back in? How does one, is there a way in which design can help with that particular process of opening up those possibilities, which, I mean, are not, you don't offer it as an easy solution to sociologists, but are there sorts of interventions which enable a sort of openness to these sort of excluded materials, excluded aspects of the research encounter, the research event? So I just want to...
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and that's, in a way, I think that's equally true for what happens in the kind of work we do. So, I added that slide of showing a screenshot of one of the papers we published, in a way as trying to follow from the things we design, not just telling a narrative about the stuff we design and why we design it, but also to try to contextualize that in what we're doing that for and how that works for us. And so I think maybe the thing is not to do this necessarily the style of design we do, but to work on some of the styles of presentation and research that we've been working with. I think you could open that to if you wanted to, look at the entire process. So as you asked that question, I was thinking that, again, we've hired documentary filmmakers to go and film the things we make. What would be quite interesting in a way is to hire a documentary filmmaker to film the framing of those things, to try to capture some of the realities of the situation in which those things are produced, and in which people are enrolled into these studies and presented with those things, and what happens when we take them away from the people, and then what happens when we go off and present them to various audiences, because all of those are important to that experience. And really, we've tended to highlight this kind of middle section as being the privileged story and kind of shove the rest under the carpet. So, yeah. Quite interesting.
General here, here music. So, coffee.